As world leaders assemble in Egypt to attend the United Nations Climate Change Conference to discuss various agenda in order to curb the current climate crisis, Ukraine is effectively using the COP27 talks to highlight environmental costs of Russia's war, as Russia's war on Ukraine leaves behind an environmental stain that will take years to clean up. In the COP27 talks, Ukraine has effectively pointed out Russia using fossil fuels as a key catalyst of destruction and how Russia's invasion is causing both an environmental as well as a humanitarian catastrophe. Ukraine has dispatched 24 officials to the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, to connect the links between the war launched by Russia in February, the soaring cost of energy due to Russia's status as a key gas supplier, and the planet-heating emissions expelled by the offensive. Ukraine has claimed that a fifth of its protected area has been ruined by the war, with the contamination of the previously fertile soil alone costing around $11 billion in damages. Ukraine's forests have been torn apart by bombs, while farmlands are now laced with landmines. The invasion in Ukraine has killed wildlife, generated pollution, and caused social instability. Heavy shelling and the movement of troops and tanks has polluted the air, water, and land. Ukraine estimating that rebuilding its shattered towns, cities, and industries will cause nearly 50 million tons of carbon dioxide to be emitted. As the Ukrainian government continues to garner international support, the President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the world leaders in Egypt in a video message and said that there can be no effective climate policy without the peace. He also touched upon the energy crisis caused by the war, acute food crisis, and millions of acres of destroyed forests. For the first time, Ukraine is hosting an exhibition space this year at a UN Climate Conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. The pavilion includes samples of different soils thudded by bombs, oak riddled with bullets, and various other things on display which show the severity of the impact of the war when it comes to the country's environment. And with me on the broadcast this minute is Oleksiy Persyuk from Kiev, a climate and energy expert at CEE Bankwatch Network. Thanks very much for being here. Let me begin by asking you for your assessment of the impact that this war really has had on Ukraine's environment.
Well, the impact, of course, is huge because the size of the combat is huge. And what we have seen in the recent months is that infrastructure and industrial plants and objects are kind of a target for missiles. So you constantly have like storages of oil being hit, which basically means that they are released, and you have soil contaminated with oil, which is extremely difficult to clean up. You effectively have to remove it and store it somewhere else. So there are a lot of also industry in Ukraine, like chemical plants, and you have chemical substances being stored, and then they're being hit and being released, and that's caused the problem, of course.
Right. When it comes to the commitments that are being made or have been made by world leaders, as someone who has seen this widespread destruction firsthand, how do you react to these series of pledges when there is a clear gap when it comes to the action?
Yeah, it's we are moving then to climate part of it. And I think for Ukraine already for a number of years, it was very important to be politically present at negotiations, not just discussing the climate itself, but some political matters, because Russia have been trying to use negotiations to legitimize, for example, occupied territories like Crimea. There was this discussion that Russia was submitting, for example, emissions, or like if it's Russian emissions, not Ukrainian emissions from Crimea. But now with this, exactly with the size of destruction, the issue becomes how you count emissions which will occur when Ukraine would need to rebuild entire infrastructure. You know, basically there are bridges or entire towns now being bombed to the ground. and you had not just money and effort put into construction of it, but also emissions, basically. And now when you reconstruct something which was destroyed before its lifespan, you spend more energy, not in just human energy, but energy as a fossil fuel to construct it. And then the question is, why should it be counted against the Ukrainian emissions if they were caused by destruction caused by Russia? So this is not entirely new issue, but I think that's one of the time when it became kind of loud at the negotiations, and it's not the only conflict in the world, so it becomes a bigger issue. How you count this destruction which is caused by aggressive countries in the war.
Right, Alexei, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.